Hello and welcome. My name is Sankalp. I am a PhD. I'm a neuroscientist. I recently completed my PhD in psychology/neuroscience from the University of Oxford. It is worth emphasizing that whatever I say on this channel is separate from my research roles at the university. And indeed, this is a personal channel. So today, what I have in store for you is something that is quite near and dear to my heart, and this is the field of psychiatry. For me, if there is one problem, if I could solve one problem in this world, then that problem will be that of poor mental health. And this could be mental health as defined as, the mental illness part of it, the depression and the formal psychiatry and anxiety and whatnot. But this is not a binary. Unlike, some other illnesses which might be more like, okay, you're either unwell or you're not, like having a flu, for example. Mental health is on a spectrum, meaning, we might have these sort of extreme ish situations where we need medical intervention, but all of us have some degree of mental health or the other on the day-to-day basis. And so we all have our mental health. And so what happens with psychiatry, what happens with psychotherapy and this whole area of mental health affects all of us, because the techniques that are discovered for illnesses are applicable to anyone else. And similarly, the other way around, like suppose we know things work for healthies, then they would be applicable even in what we call illness. And we're going to see today that the whole thing can be a little bit fuzzy and kind of broken. So I'm trying my best to not, in this my new live stream reincarnation, I'm trying my best to not use clickbait and stuff like that. But for today's video, I mean, you can see probably the title is something to do with psychiatry is broken, and that's because I kind of believe it. And it's one of those rare instances where it might actually be true. And this is not the fault of a psychiatrist. It's not the fault of doctors. You will again see this is not an easy problem at all. We're going to go into all of that. But just first of all, welcome. I hope you're all doing well. And so all is good. So I'm going to jump right in. And again, for those who are new, you may or may not know that there is this thing that I have, which is a bit of a whiteboard type setup. So this is what we're going to cover today. First, we're going to cover the problem of diagnosis. So the problem of diagnosis, the problem of, actually, instead of me writing that again and again, I'm going to just like the problem of diagnosis. Then we're going to cover the problem of treatments. So we cover what exists in treatments and whatnot. And then once this is done, I'm going to talk about what we can do about it. So I'm just going to write it as solutions. And then the solutions would be on the individual level, meaning what you and I can do to improve our mental health. But I'm also going to talk today, as you will see, on the whole field. I'm going to comment on the whole field a little bit. And the reason why I want to do that is, this is a video I made for the kind of person. There's actually a couple of kind of people. One is like if you are actively going through something, you're going through a mental health challenge, or you went through something in the recent past that the memory is fresh enough. And the reason why I make this video for you is because chances are that if you did indeed go through something and you entered this mental health care system, chances are that it failed you. And I know that not because, again, I don't trust medicine, but because I know the numbers, and we're going to talk about some of the numbers. And the people who benefit, who truly sort of, well, cured is like a fancy word because it's probably doesn't exist. There's this one video floating around on YouTube where psychiatrists ask, how many people have you actually cured? And they struggle to answer. And the reason for that, again, is it's cured is a fuzzy concept in psychiatry. And again, we're going to talk about a bit. But I'm making this video for you because I know how much pain and how much suffering having a psychiatric condition entails. And I want to be respectful of that, first of all, throughout this whole stream today. So, it's I'm going to talk about it as if we talk about data, we can talk about research, and sometimes we lose sight of the fact that this is about individuals. And sometimes we lose sight of the fact that this is about our own lived experience. So just before we begin, I want to pay a bit of respects to that, and know that I'm sensitive to that suffering. Like, I myself have had issues in the past, and I've had countless friends who have either supported directly or just known that this is a big problem. So I want to be respectful of that. And the second caveat I want to give before I start also is, none of what I say today is meant as a dig at a psychiatrist or as a mental health professional, because I believe they're trying their best. So what's happening is not that the individuals are not performing. It's not that the individual therapist or the individual doctor is wrong, but as a field, psychiatry has a lot of progress to be made, and a lot of things we have done in the past might not be very ideal, let's just say that. And so we are going to cover that in this framework of, we're going to talk about diagnosis, the problem of diagnosis, the problem of treatment, and I'm again going to explain what that means, and then we're going to talk about the solutions today. So that's the plan for today's stream, and hopefully that is kind of helpful. So that is good. So what is this problem of diagnosis? I'm going to pull up my notes here. So look, this is what happens. So what happens is, I'm going to just flip this page so that I'm ready. So let's say you have a mental health problem, and you go to, let's say, a psychiatrist, right? Now what happens is, sorry, just give me a sec. My notes are a little dysfunctional. Okay, good. So when you go to a doctor, what happens is they might just evaluate you. They might ask you a series of questions, and then they give you a diagnosis, right? And so it's important to kind of look at the history of psychiatric diagnosis. And when you look at the history, you will find that a lot of psychiatric diagnoses have just been like sort of random. So have been based on consensus, is probably a better way to say it. So if you look at the history again, you will see that the first diagnosis ever made was basically just, are you sane or are you insane? That literally was the diagnostic system. And of course, over time we have refined it. But simply put, so there are two ways in which psychiatric diseases are diagnosed. And there's like DSM, the Diagnostic Statistical Manual. It comes from America, and then the World Health Organization has its thing called ICD, International Classification of Diseases, and psychiatrists generally use one of those two. There might be some other there indeed are some other frameworks, but these two are the dominant ones. So when you go to a doctor, they will give you some, they'll ask you a bunch of questions, and they'll make a diagnosis. And really, therefore, we lack a little bit of a biological basis for it. So what I want you to think about is, let's say we have this person here, and this person goes to a doctor, and they say, look, I have yellow eyes. What the doctor does not do is take them at face value and be like, oh, of course you have yellow eyes. And then they do not just directly go to the treatment. What the doctor here in this case might do is suspect. There might be a suspicion that, look, there is some sort of a liver thing going on here. And they may order a test. And this test could be something like, what's called bilirubin. My apologies if bilirubin, is that how it's said? Again, I apologize to all the doctors here. And if that test comes positive and there are symptoms, that's when we proceed towards diagnosis, and that's when we proceed toward treatment. And hopefully, at the end of all of that, the patient goes from that to that, right? And so that's like the standard framework of what we think is good evidence-based healthcare. And of course, when this test happens, hopefully this test is sort of verified, and there's a lot of studies done on it. And so therefore we are able to make a concrete diagnosis that, there's this liver thing going on, and then you move on to treatment. right? In the case of mental health, what happens is we sort of bypass this step. This step just doesn't happen. What happens is you go from symptoms, you just take this whoop to there. Well, actually, you go from here and then you go to here, right? And this thing is bypassed because we don't know what it means to have a mental health problem. And you can take any mental health problem, be it depression, anxiety, schizophrenia, what have you. There is no test here that we can perform, and the reason for that is we don't mostly know what the biological basis of any of this mental health or if any mental health condition might be. And you're like, oh, but what if there is no biological basis? And that's precisely the point. Maybe there is not, but maybe there is. And the answer to that is we don't know. And the problem therefore is we don't have any objective test that is able to verify whether this diagnosis is the right diagnosis or not. So what you therefore have is this situation that one often finds themselves in when they are dealing with a psychiatric mental health issue. And by the way, in today's video, I'm not talking at all about anything to do with stigma, and that's of course a whole problem of its own, right? If you have a mental health problem, you may not want to talk about it, and you may certainly not want to seek help, seek treatment, and then that's a topic for another day. But today I'm just talking about like the raw hard facts and the hard science around this area. And we'll leave the societal human bits for some other day, potentially cover it later today as well. But looks good. So here we are. So this is what happens. So if you are you go to a doctor, and since there is no test, what happens is you might have a psychiatrist. So this is our psychiatrist, and let's give them a stethoscope so that we say that, hey, this is a doctor. So this is a doctor, and you may have Dr. B again. And let's also give them a stethoscope. That's a very bad stethoscope, I know, and it's sort of it's almost like there's like wind flowing from underneath that elevates the stethoscope. But anyway, so you have these two psychiatrists. Let's call them Dr. A and Dr. B. Dr. B. And then you have person seeking treatment. And so what happens is this person might say like, look, I had low mood. And what might happen is that Dr. A might be like, hey, look, you have anxiety. And Dr. B might be like, hey, look, you have depression. And so you see what the problem with this, right? Like we have a hard time getting these two clinicians to agree on what the condition itself is. And this thing is, by the way, it's one of the problems of diagnosis. So, we are in the diagnosis section. And the problem here is that these two clinicians are not even agreeing on what the problem itself is. How would they agree on the treatment? I just dropped my marker here. Oh boy. All right. Hello. Welcome. So these people, okay. So these people do not even agree on the diagnosis. How would they agree on the treatment? Like, we're not even clear on what the problem is. And this thing is a big problem in psychiatry. I drew it with diagrams, but let's look into the science of it a little bit now. So the science of it, above and beyond diagrams, is this. So they look at these things. So the DSM itself, so this is the American Psychiatric Association. They carry out study to see, how effective are their diagnostic labels, and are we making sense? Are psychiatrists even agreeing on it? Is it clear enough, basically? And unfortunately, the problem seems to be that they're not. They're not super clear. So this thing is called inter-rater reliability. And so I have some figures, so some numbers with me here. Is that it seems like exact same people can be given different diagnoses, of course, and as a consequence, they can be given different treatment. And the figure that's often cited here is like around 60%. And so that's called like inter-rater reliability. So the study here I'm referring to it's published by this author called Regia is the last name. It's a 2013 study, American Journal of Psychiatry, basically the official study, let's say. So this is like it's almost like APA marking their own homework. And so if at all anything, you would expect the numbers to be high here, if they have a bias. But what they find is for maybe it's actually worth writing these things down. But they found that for depression, come back here. So they found that for depression, so they found for depression, also known as MDD, it's about 32% better than just random guessing. So when two people are guessing about what the condition is, let's say you and I are talking about a coin flip, and I guess it's heads, you guess it's tails, the chances that we agree on the same thing are like 50%. So you need to remove chance from it. So this measure, it's called kappa. It's measures for what is the agreement rate above and beyond random guessing. And so that's the measure that this is. And so on MDD, it's only like 30% improvement above and beyond random guessing. For anxiety, so generalized anxiety disorder, it's about 20%, so it's even worse. There's this thing they call mixed anxiety depressive disorder, so like a combination of these two, and for that it's basically zero. So it's very hard to get people to agree with this mixed sort of combination type. For schizophrenia, it's 46%, so this is on the better side, and PTSD is 67%, so this is also on slightly better. So, but you can see none of these numbers are kind of good. Maybe with the exception of PTSD. With everything else, we are not able to agree on what the appropriate label should be, despite like decades at this point of refinement of the guidelines and whatnot. And so this suggests that there is this underlying problem that maybe, just maybe, what we are diagnosing is not the phenomenon itself. Like there is no underlying phenomenon there, or at least the partitions we have made of what the phenomenon is not a good partition. Now, look, at this point, I want to be clear. I am not saying that psychiatric illness does not exist. Of course it does. Like, I mean, how much suffering do you want to see in this world to believe that is the case? But what I am saying is the way we are characterizing them may not be appropriate. The way we are partitioning them may not be appropriate, given what we know about it. By the way, this was something I had for the intro, which I did not say too much. So, of course, there's this massive human cost to psychiatric illnesses. But what people do not get is also there's a massive economic burden. Now, of course, the feelings and stuff, for me, will always come first, because that's like lived experience and the suffering is real. But even from a pure economic perspective, a psychiatric illnesses overall here in the UK costs about like 400 billion pounds a year. Now that's bigger than the budget of the National Health Service, which is UK's state-run medical service. And it's also bigger than the estimated cost of the COVID pandemic itself. So it's economically speaking, it's like having a pandemic level crisis every year, all over again. And I think hopefully that helps you understand that this is such a serious and important problem that we need to focus on solving. All right, so hopefully you understand this problem of what's called inter-rater reliability, which is to say that if there are two doctors who want to diagnose a psychiatric condition, they need to agree on it. But the problem is that we have very poor inter-rater reliability, suggesting that what we are diagnosing might not be that concrete in the first place, or the way we are partitioning things may not be appropriate in the first place. And if you are like, oh, why don't we look at the brain? And what do you think has happened? People have looked at the brain. And the problem is we cannot, or certainly until now have not, been able to find any clear biological basis. There is nothing in the brain that indicates that, look, this is a depressed brain with 100% certainty, or even any degree of certainty for that matter. Now, having said that, there has been correlations. There have been some findings, but those are correlations, right? You don't necessarily know what caused what. Maybe the brain change was actually a consequence, not the cause of the problem, and so on. So, generally speaking, there is no biological basis. In other words, there's no clear test that has been shown to exist so far when it comes to psychiatric and mental health problems. Alrighty, right? So that's the problem of the inter-rater reliability. I'm going to take a sip of water before going on to talk about the next problem. Some protein in this one today. Okay. Awesome. So we talked about the problem of inter-rater reliability. Now we're going to talk about the problem of symptom heterogeneity. Now, of course, this is a fancy word, but stay with me. It's actually much easier than what it sounds like. And symptom heterogeneity is the problem that even within a psychiatric illness, so take depression, for example, the symptoms that we use to characterize that illness can be like worlds apart. So, for example, well, actually, the example that illustrates this better is schizophrenia. So, for those who do not know, schizophrenia is massively debilitating condition. Well, of course, depends on the severity, where people have hallucinations, and they might have this sort of a thing that someone is talking to me where no one is, and they might hear sounds and whatnot. So characterized by psychotic episodes. And you may have this problem where even in schizophrenia, which seems, kind of like clear what the problem is, you may have hallucinations and delusions as one symptom, but on the other hand, you might have disorganized speech. Now, those two symptoms are like worlds apart. And so again, this, I don't know, but it for me, it undermines my confidence in the current diagnostic labels, because we have delusions on one hand and disorganized speech on the other hand, and it's not easy to put them together as one thing, right? And people have tried to make sub partitions within it, but right now we are trying to talk about what the state is right now. We are going to talk in the future about how this might change and what might be the solutions for it. But just as things are right now, we have this problem of symptom heterogeneity. Now, if you look at depression, which is another mental health problem, serious one, you will look at one of the symptoms can be low mood, but the other symptom might be something totally different, like a lack of vigor or energy. And in that case, you might think that, oh, it kind of goes together, but an inability to experience pleasure, which is another thing called anhedonia, and let's say on the other hand, apathy, which is, the lack of energy, those are kind of different things. And I'm sure all of us know people in our lives who have experienced low mood or inability to experience pleasure, anhedonia that is, but not have experienced a lack of energy. And the other way around, we all know people who might be tired and fatigued, but might not have the other symptoms of anhedonia, for example. And again, hopefully this gives you a sense of why it might be a problem to class all of those symptoms as one thing. And so that is the other big problem when it comes to psychiatric diagnosis, is even within a category, even when we agree within a category, there's huge variance in what actually is the symptom in the first place, what actually is underlying people's conditions in the first place. So hopefully that gives you a sense of this other problem of diagnosis. So there are two problems I highlighted. One is inter-rater variability, which is to say psychiatrists don't necessarily agree on what the diagnosis should be. And the second one being symptom heterogeneity, meaning within an illness, it doesn't seem very natural to type these broad different clusters into one. And so, and of course, there's this whole idea that psychiatric illnesses would be like a spectrum, like it's a spectrum disease. So that's something we need to think of, like, is, drawing these sort of binary categories is even worth it. Of course, I'm going to suggest some solutions later on today. So we are now, I think, ready to talk about the problem of treatment. So far we have been talking about the problem of diagnosis. Now we're going to talk about the problem of treatment. And so what is the problem with treatment? So there is this wonderful study that has been done. It's probably one of the biggest / most influential study ever done in psychiatry and psychiatric treatment. It's called the STAR-D study. And the whole point of the study was to just evaluate whether psychiatric treatments are working, or if they are working, to what degree are they working? If they are not working, to what degree are they not working? So let me go back to the drawing board here and explain to you what this study was. So this is there we go. Let me just get this straight. This is the STAR, I think it's written like this, STAR-D study. And so what these people did is they just wanted to find out how well psychiatry works overall. And what they had is people, so they had, like, let's say a patient who came in with a problem, and a psychiatrist assessed them, and either they were indeed eligible for psychiatric treatment or not. So if they're not eligible for treatment, maybe there's some other treatment that they are more eligible for. Maybe they're just not candidates. They're not diagnosed with a psychiatric condition. If it's a no, then that's a no. But if they were indeed eligible, they were subjected to levels of treatment. So if level 1 worked, if it worked, then great. Then they were just follow up. But if it did not work, then they would go to a level 2 level of treatment. And then you can imagine. So again, if it worked, great, follow up them. And if they do not, then you just go up to the next level of treatment. So this went on for 4 levels. So hopefully I'm not too outside the screen here. So this went on for 4 levels. So let me just write that here. I want you to know the name of the study. It's kind of a nice search term to have. So what are these levels, right? Let's start with what these levels are. So in the first level, they were given a common antidepressant. It's called SSRIs. So this is, by the way, a study on depression. I want to be careful. I've been talking about mental health in general, but now we're sort of focusing on depression here. So they were first given an SSRI. And if that did not work, then they were given some other options. So these options could include therapy, or it could include some other drugs, or it could include a combination of these two. And this was randomized. So the psychiatrist did some ways so that, not everyone is getting the same treatment. And, they balanced it out so that we get enough sort of data on every type of a treatment. In the third treatment, this went even more aggressive. So here they were given something like lithium. So here they were like antidepressants. I'm just going to write SSRI. Here as an example, this could be SSRI plus CBT, let's say. As an example, cognitive behavioral therapy. Here they might have, they might have given something more aggressive and potentially causing more side effects like lithium. And for the final one, they gave something called as a MAO inhibitor, or mono amine oxidase, or something to that effect, inhibitor. So this is something that works on some neurotransmitters in the brain. And more importantly, this is this causes a lot of side effects, like serious side effects. So this is the chain that people went through. And so at every stage, the researchers were evaluating what is the likelihood that this treatment is working. So if I give this treatment to 100 people, how many are likely to succeed? And so in the original study, they found that, let's say, so in the original study, they found that at the end, after doing all of this, they found that only about 67% of people were thought to enter remission. Now, what is remission? Remission is this idea that they're temporarily cured, at least. The symptoms might return later or whatnot, but they're temporarily cured. So after going through this entire pipeline, about 67% of people enter remission. And if you're thinking that is a high number, first of all, I mean, it's better than nothing. So good on people for improving and good on these people for creating this protocol. But this also means that 1 in 3 people did not succeed despite basically all of the state of the art treatments that we had at this point. And that's, to me, is jarring. And if you actually look at the individual numbers, it would be something to the effect of like 30%, 40% and similar, and they get progressively less and less. Then here there's like just 15 or 20% of people who are actually improving. And so there is this problem that for most people, even after going through this multi-layer, multi-chain treatment protocol, 1 in 3 people are absolutely not responding at all. We are not even counting the gray areas of, somewhat responding. We are talking about, no, they did not enter remission at all. And so that's 67%. And here's what I found very striking. So there were some researchers who analyzed this data even further. So let me again, lost my notes here. Whoopsie doops. Okay, there we are. So there were some researchers who analyzed this data even further. So this study, by the way, this cumulative effect was published in 2006 and the American Journal of Psychiatry. John Rush is the first author. And then there were some follow-up studies that some researchers did later to just reanalyze this data, and they found like some problems in their protocols and whatnot. And so what they did is reanalyze the data, and they found that the actual number was actually much lower. So they found that the actual number was like around 35%. Now, you might want to look at this later study because so the direct quote from that study is, in contrast to the study original reported 67% cumulative remission rate after up to 4 antidepressant trials, the rate was 35% when using the protocol stipulated HRSD, meaning the scale that they use was not according to the protocol. And once you use that as an inclusion criteria in your analysis, you see that this rate drops significantly to 35%. And so this obviously is even worse. So to me, this number is low as well. But to see this, and even if you be charitable and say that, look, hey, the reality might be something in between that, the problem. What this basically is saying is, if you go to a psychiatrist, the chances that you're improving is basically equivalent to a coin toss. And that's, to me, that's jarring, that's disappointing, that is a call to action and whatnot. So hopefully that gives you a sense, again, if you have been in the system, be it you're a patient, a client, or you're on the other side of, maybe you are a psychiatrist or a doctor or a researcher. Hopefully this gives you a sense of the kind of problem that we have at our hands and the kind of problem that we want to solve in psychiatry going forward. Now, having said that, I think it's now time to talk a little bit about what the solutions might be. So we have talked what the problem is. We have talked about the problem with diagnosis. And now we are talking about the problem with treatments. And therefore, given that both these things are problems, we we obviously have this question of what do we do to solve this? Like, what can we do either on the individual level or on the grander societal researcher? How do we, like, what does the solution to this problem look like? And so this is a part of it was part of my PhD. So I spent some time thinking about this problem. And I have a few ideas, let's just say. So the first thing is, let's talk about the individual level first. So there is the individual level. And for that, I think the solution is having more agency. So I think the solution for the individual is actually having more agency. So what happens is when you have like a mental health problem, or when you have any psychiatric or medical problem, you go to the doctor and you expect that, the doctor knows about this thing more than you do. And you expect that the doctor has insight into a problem that helps you recover. So if I go to a dentist, I expect and hope and pray that this dentist will know more about teeth than I do. They would know about all the layers. I've had plenty of dental procedures. I know nothing basically about my teeth and their structure, and certainly don't know anything about what goes on inside the gums and whatnot. And so when I go to a doctor, I'm able to relax and surrender a little bit and sort of trust them to do their thing. Unfortunately, we cannot do that for psychiatry too much. And it is, again, not because doctors are evil or anything like that. It's just because we do not know as much about psychiatry at all. And so we are in this interesting situation that the patient, the client, actually has much better insight into the condition than the expert, so to speak. And this is a feature, not a bug. We hope that we have more insight about our minds than in any other part of the body, let's say. So when you are, look, I am an advocate of having a sense of agency, even in other areas of life. Even when you are going to the dentist, you still have agency about which dentist to choose. You may encounter a dentist who is not behaving well, let's say. Maybe you're just not feeling it, and you feel that they're not dedicated to their craft. You still have agency to change the dentist and whatnot. But in psychiatry, I think the onus on that is way, like the need for that, the necessity for that is a bit too higher. The onus is on you a little bit more than other medical conditions because of that lack of clarity on what these mental health issues might entail. And so when you go to a doctor, I would invite you to have a high degree of agency. And know that the doctor there is a little bit more clueless than other fields of medicine. And when I say what is it about agency? Look, first of all, I'm encouraging trust. Don't get me wrong. This is not about not having trust with your clinician. But what it is about is knowing that you do have insight, like you do have awareness. And that is valuable for treatment. So know that your insights matter. What you think about what's causing your conditions matter. And you can have a little bit more of a assertive attitude, so to speak. And again, by that, I don't mean like cause fights or anything. But I do know people who are, well, a lot of people, as you saw in the stats, there's a lot of chances of misdiagnosis and getting things wrong and a little bit of trial and error approach. So what you feel matters, and I invite you to bring that to the table and be confident with that, and not just take the clinician's word for face value. And if you're a good, if there is a good clinician, they would appreciate that. They should be able to listen to you carefully and craft the treatment, craft your care, taking into account your subjective experience. And if it's not a very good clinician, they would probably just treat it as protocol and to their problem, because as we saw, the protocols are not there yet. So whether you're going to a psychotherapist, whether you're going to a psychiatrist, or even like a life coach or things like that, if this is not like a clinical problem, then in any of these cases, I invite you to maintain that agency. And this is personal opinion, by the way. Again, this is just to be clear. This is not like science or anything. This is just my personal opinion in this area. But this is, I think, what is in the control of the individual when they are seeking care from psychiatric problems. Right. So there are also some, so that's the individual level. And I think individual level is good, but it can only get us that far. Of course, within the concept of agency is included this idea that you can obviously seek alternative treatments like meditation and whatnot. Again, do it carefully, do it with the guidance of a clinician if you have the psychiatric problem. And if you're just doing it for general mental health, then perhaps it's more easier for you to experiment. But in terms of what science is doing, what we are doing with science is build better diagnoses. And a lot is coming from data. So data driven diagnosis. So one of the methods for this is what's called factor analysis. And what we do, so this is part of the study I did as part of my PhD. You can check it out. It's published in this journal called PNAS, Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. So if you search my name, type PNAS, you should probably find it. And what we did was, ask a lot of people, like over 1,000 people, about a lot of their psychiatric personal questions. And this was anonymized, by the way, so I'm not able to associate any data with any particular person. And we asked a lot of people to fill out a lot of these standardized questionnaires. So what has happened in the field is over the years, we have developed a lot of these standardized questionnaires that we can administer to people with the hopes that there's a bit more objectivity in psychiatric diagnosis. So these questionnaires are validated, meaning they're tested in people, and there's some sort of a reliability that these tests bring with them. So what we did is we administered a lot of them. So from depression, from anxiety. So every person was filling a lot of different scales. I think the overall question was well over 100. So imagine people filling like 100 items indicating their mental health, their personality. And then what we do is instead of, manually going and thinking that, look, this person has depression, or look, this person might have schizophrenia, or this person might have autism. What we do is put all this data and ask a computer, basically, not to give a diagnostic or label, but ask the computer, what are the conditions that seem to go hand in hand? So what are the items that in all of these people are varying together? So let's say if a person has high depression score, they also seem to have a higher anxiety score. But that is separate from a low pleasure score, which seems to be a different thing altogether, right? Or maybe there is something called as apathy. And maybe that is actually related more to something. Or maybe it's a completely different category of its own, right? So what you do is ask a computer, give it a lot of this data points and ask a computer to find what are these things that are quote unquote clustering together or varying together, what tend to go hand in hand, what are these symptoms, and what are the symptoms that seem to have independent variance. So this thing varying has no impact on the other symptom varying, right? And so with all of these, we were able to identify 7 key factors, as we call them, that seem to be independently varying. So one of these factors was actually depression, anxiety, not depression and anxiety, but depression, anxiety as one thing. So what the data seems to suggest is it might be useful to think of depression, anxiety as one construct as opposed to something else. But what we did find is anhedonia, which is the inability to experience pleasure, was a completely different factor. So it sort of varied independently. It had its own thing going on, which was not very connected with the anxiety, depression symptoms. And so that suggests that one thing that we considered critical for depression, quote unquote, might actually be a separate thing. Like we might be better off treating it as a separate illness than we might be treating just depression itself. So hopefully that gives you a sense of how a data-driven methodology will look like. So humans can't look at that much data and then find relationships. That's a bit too much for it. But for a computer, that's trivial. And so we were able to find these characterizations of these 7 factors. And moreover, and this is where it gets interesting, later on, I was also able to show that there was connectivity between some parts of the brain. So this was like a dopamine parts of the brain with more of the front part of the brain. So the exact region is substantia nigra to anterior insula. You don't need to know the names. We found that connectivity between that region scaled in proportion to one of my factors. And I think, again, this was the depression anxiety factor, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while. But the point being, there is, when you partition the psychiatric illnesses with data rather than just hypothesis or guesswork essentially, then there is some evidence to believe that partition, this newly created data driven partition, might actually link to something in the brain. Now we are in too early days to definitively say that this is the case, and again, for all we know, this is just another spurious correlation. I hope not. And but having said that, it's definitely, I think, a more reliable way to diagnose, because at least we are driving ourselves with what truly is the case, rather than a committee sitting and just deciding that, like, this is what our diagnosis should be. So hopefully that gives you a sense of what a data-driven diagnosis might look like. And so factor analysis was just one method, by the way, and I think we are getting much better and better at making these diagnoses. And so in my study, I only had questionnaires. In a follow-up study that we're doing right now as we speak, is we're also inputting things like brain regions, like actual MRI scans in this model. So you can imagine, there's like MRI, there goes questionnaires, then there goes, let's say, daily diaries. So, self-report diaries. And this goes into this data-driven model. This goes into, like, let's call it machine learning model, which is a bit of a black box. And then this might output a better partition. So a better partition of all the illnesses. So this is for example depression, this is anxiety or whatnot. Now critically, this is not this, well, I shouldn't actually call it depression anxiety, because it's not just outputting the current labels, it's creating new labels in the first place. So this is depression anxiety, this is anhedonia, this is, let's say, is apathy. Again, this is just an example. And so creating these better labels with data might be one way forward. This is what's typically called precision psychiatry, where every person might have their own MRI, might have their own questionnaires, and we might be able to create like a custom label for them, and therefore create a custom treatment for them. And so, of course, the third thing above data-driven diagnosis will be like novel treatments. So it is possible, novel treatments. So it is possible that we are able to predict, like, it is possible, first of all, that the current treatments, the current SSRIs, this cognitive behavioral therapy and whatnot, that are able to, so let's say we find that this type, this subtype or this factor responds to SSRIs better. We might find that this factor might respond to therapy better. We might find that this factor responds to exercise better, right? So it's apathy. It's possible. Like, look, this is not like by any way set mapping, but the hope of creating these data-driven labels is precisely that we are able to have treatments that follow from these labels. Either they follow trivially, so for example, if this is a lack of energy, then maybe exercise is the trivial treatment, or they follow evidence-based. So you try many treatments and it seems like this thing responds best to exercise, let's say. But perhaps what we have already is not sufficient. And again, I showed you data earlier that suggests that might indeed be the case, because people who went even through the whole protocol, very few people actually still enter remission, right? And so the treatments that are emerging are quite promising. And one of the promising things has been ketamine. And today, my intention today is to just give like a broad overview. It is not to, directly talk about the science of each of these individually. Perhaps we can save that for another time. But ketamine is one of them that's showing like radical, fast improvements in depression performance. There's obviously psychedelics more broadly. Psychedelics. Again, this is by no means a done deal. This is all experimental at this point. And here in the Oxford world, there is a lot of enthusiasm around ultrasound. So these are like these are like sound waves that we can send in deep parts of the brain. And these sound waves can temporarily, momentarily, perhaps excite or disrupt some regions of the brain that are, think of it like a little bit of a restart. And that might lead to some improvements. Again, yeah, this is more of a hypothesis than it is a done deal, but there is some promise here and there's some excitement around that. And something that I am personally testing is this thing called biofeedback. Meaning what happens is you put people in an MRI scanner. Let me just draw it here. You put people inside an MRI scanner. So someone goes inside a scanner. So this is like the MRI scanner. And then what we do is we take their brain images. So let's say that's the brain. And we show them, we extract their dopamine signal live. So dopamine signal is extracted and we show them as a thermometer. So let's say we show that at this point their dopamine signal is, let's say, 60%. And we show them again and we ask them to increase their dopamine signal as they see it. So we ask them to try out whatever strategy they want to try out. And once they find that this strategy is actually working in increasing their dopamine signal, we invite them to do that more often. And this thing is called biofeedback or neurofeedback. I think neurofeedback is more specific. Biofeedback could even be through heart rate or whatnot. Neurofeedback would be specific to MRIs. And I mean, I'm not allowed to spill the beans yet because this is all ongoing work. And you'll soon see work published by people from my group and other groups across the world. But at this point, all I can say is it looks very promising. Like it looks that there is something there. And again, the exact numbers, the exact data will come out with time. I think one of the studies is in peer review right now. So it's actively been evaluated. The other one we are setting up right now. So all of that is exciting and I will be sure to keep you updated if we make some breakthrough there. Just on a personal note, of course, as a researcher, I have this privilege of trying out these things firsthand every now and then. And I did try out the biofeedback scan a few weeks ago. And I must say it's the most fun I've had inside an MRI scanner ever. So at the very least, it had that value of making me enjoy time inside the scanner. It's not pleasant at all, by the way, because you're stuck in this machine and there's just like these sounds that of the scanner. And to have fun inside that environment says something. So hopefully that is useful. Anyway, we are towards the end of today's presentation. It's a bit theoretical, not as mass appealing, I suppose. But I do think if someone is struggling, then understanding this lay of the land is kind of helpful. And it helps depersonalize problems a little bit. Like we think that, if I am struggling, if I am having a mental health crisis, then it's my fault. And hopefully seeing the lay of the land, hopefully seeing the lay of how mental health treatment works and where it's failing, hopefully helps ease that burden a little bit. Now, of course, it might also be like, oh, yikes. That means there is nothing right now. And that's not the case. People still experience benefits. It's perhaps not as high a likelihood as we'd like it to be, but people still experience benefits. So hopefully none of this hampers hope. Like hopefully you'll still maintain the hope. But at the same time, my hope in making this presentation was that you also get a bigger picture understanding so that the effect of it is a little bit of letting go and understanding the larger picture sort of makes our personal responsibility a little less. And we are able to attribute problems at the right places. So it's not the individual doctor that's creating the problem. It's not that. It's not the individual therapist who's probably also trying their best. But, and it's certainly not us or you or whoever is struggling. It is a larger problem. It's a larger systematic problem. And so this is what I want to end with. Mental health is one of the most complex health challenges we have ever seen as humans. Now, of course, I don't want to say other challenges are not complex, like the heart and stuff, but the very fact that we have been able to make so much progress up to the point of treatment that, we have a heart problem and we are able to like do a bypass surgery where we take individual blood vessels and, route them in a certain way that we want, and people do fine, and we have pacemakers and whatnot. That is one field. And in the other field, we are not even able to devise one single test. We don't even know how it looks like. We're not even able to agree much beyond chance on what the problem is. And the reason for that is the complexity of mental health problems, is the diversity of it, is the different ways in which it presents itself. And this is a tough problem to crack. It's one of the hardest problems, at least I have ever encountered. And I am, again, as I said in the beginning, if I were to solve one problem in my lifetime, it's probably this one. And again, I'm not saying it's going to be me or anything. It's probably not a one-person job anyway. But my hope is that bringing attention to these problems, hopefully articulating these problems in this somewhat clear way, helps us understand and appreciate the complexity of it, and also helps us with a little bit of a drive towards solving this problem. And while I was talking with research about mental health problems as in mental illness, where you seek psychiatric help, as I also said in the earlier, this is just a spectrum illness, meaning we are all on the spectrum somewhere. And so it's not just about people who want to go to the psychiatrist. It's also about everyone. So I invite you to prioritize mental health. Ultimately, I like to say that, look, the minds is all we have. Our experience of the world is filtered through the lens of our minds. Excuse me, it was a very bad time to have a burp. But our experience of the world is filtered through the lens of our minds. And so our quality of life is the same as the quality of our minds. And if we do not take care of our minds, then we cannot have a good chance at having a good quality of life. It does not matter how rich you are. It does not matter how many possessions you have. It doesn't matter how much attention you get in this world. If the quality of our minds is not good, then the quality of our lives is not good. And so in wrapping, I just want to invite you to prioritize the quality of your minds and pay attention to it. And whatever your thing is it journaling, if it's meditation, do it. Take this as a reminder for that. Righty. Well, I am all good. And I hope you all are good as well. I'm just checking the chat, by the way. All wonderful. And yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap for today. Again, there is a scorecard that you can access for free. I have posted it in the chat, but you can also find it in the comments, hopefully. And if you take the scorecard, it will measure. So some of the items from the scorecard, well, I can't literally give you the things that are used in clinical settings because they might have copyright associated with it. But through my best judgment, I have created a scorecard which helps measure your emotional intelligence and gives you a score at the end. It's inspired heavily by the validated scales we have. And it gives you like an assessment of, this is the area of emotional intelligence you need improvement in. This is good. So it's free. Just do take it on, and hopefully you like it, and hopefully that makes sense. If you're interested in a little bit more support from myself in a low pressure sort of environment, I have a school community. It's paid, but it's relatively affordable, quite affordable. So do check that out. Should be in the description, link in bio somewhere. And if I'm planning to make these live streams a regular thing, so let me know what kind of topics you would like to be covered. Like, what is the thing that you want some feedback on? What is the kind of thing that you think might be helpful? And what is the kind of thing that might add some value? So, what I have planned is things like memory, perhaps more about dopamine, perhaps talking about some latest neuroscience research. Hopefully, something like that is helpful. But other than that, it was a pleasure to talk about psychiatry today. Again, this is a little bit of a, I mean, to me, it's not boring, but I can see why it might not get too much like attention on the internet. But I do think it's important, and I do think it might help some people to get this broad picture overview. So once again, this is my time to wrap. It was a privilege to be here. It was fun to discuss some of these topics, and in the future I will cover perhaps more papers that are active, so some recent hard-hitting science, or I might cover things that are more applicable and tools based. Of course, the tools get a lot of more attention than the papers, but I like the science, and hopefully ideally we'll cover both. So it was a pleasure to be with you. Have a lovely evening, and I will see you soon, I suppose, next week.